Welcome to the Unit Economics Podcast. I'm Josh Stabinsky. On today's episode, I sit down with Jane Wong, co-founder of Noon. Noon is making functional mushroom gummies for focus, stress, sleep, and energy. But the product is really built around a harder question. How do you take ingredients that can feel medicinal, earthy, or unfamiliar and make them easy enough for someone to use every day? This creates a lot of hard operating questions. Gummies are familiar and easy to try, but they're also a difficult vehicle for serious functional ingredients. Noon had to find a manufacturer that could handle a dual-layer gummy, preserve the strength of formulation, and still create something that could sit on shelf without being mistaken for candy. In this conversation, we get into all the formulation work behind making the product taste good, the trade-off between gummies, tinctures, pills, and powders when thinking about form factor, how packaging can help explain an unfamiliar product, and what changes when a young supplement brand needs to start preparing for a launch at Target. I learned a lot during my conversation with Jane, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Jane, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. If you wouldn't mind just starting with a background on yourself, that would be great.
Sure. I'm Jane Wong. I'm one of the co-founders of Noon. My background has been in design, technology, experiential for the last 10, 15 years. I've had a long career working in consumer products and consumer experiences, everything from like the Googles, Nikes, Apples of the world up until now. And Noon was actually started after burning out, as one does, living in New York, being a creative director. And it really came about wanting to find a more holistic and natural solution for managing daily life and living better.
Talk to me a little bit about how you came to this specific idea. What were you seeing in the market that told you this is the right thing to pursue?
So Noon really started, like I said, I burned out. It was just around COVID. And I think everyone at this time was realizing how important mental health was and also what it actually was. I think prior to that, mental health was, I felt like something very scary, very always something diagnosable. It was usually more extreme. During COVID, when more people started to have a better vocabulary, I would say, around what mental health actually is, what cognitive health actually is, what burnout actually can be. This just allowed people to actually have a better conversation around how important mental health is and how important the mind is for everyday living as much as the body. And for me, again, when I had burned out, I was given 2 weeks worth of steroids. Like, I just wasn't given a very good solution for where I was, and it wasn't actually solving the problem at its root. And so it put me on my own journey to figure out, what are some ways that I can help myself? How can I learn more about how the mind works and how the mind actually impacts the body? And this is sort of the neuroscience piece that we bring into the equation. And for me, again, wanting to find more natural solutions, this, reaction away from big pharma and also just overprescription. So wanting to combine these two worlds, neuroscience, plant science together into again, products that people could take on a day-to-day basis that actually can move the needle and help you calibrate rather than, again, swing you from high to low. And obviously, when I thought about what are the ingredients and the components to this company that we need to put together from an expertise perspective, I thought about Julie and Christine. So I have 2 other co-founders. Julie's a naturopathic doctor and Christine's a neuroscientist. So again, they're beautiful brains together to actually create the right products.
There's so many directions we could go in. I'm interested to hear about how you landed on gummies as a form factor and what you were looking at in the market in terms of, I guess, ingredient sourcing. Like, why mushrooms as your primary focal point, and then why gummies as the form factor?
I looked around me, like, as we were ideating on this company, there weren't that many solutions on the market that tapped into the cognitive aspect of stress or living in general. And anything that did exist was CBD, some sort of THC gummy, or again, tinctures, or there were pills. And for me, none of these formats really were very sticky. I think, again, people didn't really land on the right solution because there just weren't that many to begin with. So this is where like the world of cognitive wellness was really exciting for me because it is a white space. And that's a way that I get very challenged professionally and also creatively. So for me, it was really looking at what were the larger market trends, what are formats? And of course, product market fit is something that everybody talks about. If the product itself doesn't stick, it doesn't matter, all the work that you put into it. It just needs to actually fit. And when you think of nutraceutical supplements, one thing that definitely rang true, universally and globally, is that gummies are beloved by everybody. So I'm like quite bullish on it in that sense that it's universally legible, it's easy to understand, everyone knows how to take it, and the barrier to trial is very low. But of course, at the time when we were starting, gummies have never traditionally been known for being a great vehicle for ingredients. They need heat. Heat degrades natural plant material, and also again the sort of like general bioavailability of everything. So again, traditionally gummies were not very good as a supplement. But now, of course, and we like took our time to actually build the brand, also figure out the right manufacturer. We only found two companies in the world that could actually do what we were doing. And the brief really was, could we take something like a tincture and put it into a gummy format? Something that's highly bioavailable, but put it into a format that's more shareable, more fun, tastier. And from an ingredient perspective, Christine and Julie together were able to create the right formulations. And when we thought about all the synergies amongst plants and amino acids and vitamins that we wanted, we obviously thought from like an outcome basis. Functional mushrooms became, I would say, a cornerstone of what we were creating, not because it was also on trend, but also because a lot of functional mushrooms are both nootropics and adaptogens. So they're great for both mind and body, and they're synergistic, they're stackable. So again, they have a lot of really great properties that we could definitely use in all of our formulas.
For listeners who aren't familiar with the terms nootropics and adaptogens, do you mind just explaining what those both mean?
Yeah. So adaptogens are compounds that essentially help your body adapt better to stress, help you regulate cortisol in your body. Again, a lot of functional mushrooms do this, ashwagandha as well, which is a popular herb. Nootropics essentially are other compounds and enhance cognitive function. So a lot of people think about lion's mane or cordyceps as, again, something that they understand. So great for neuroregeneration, great for, again, helping you feel a little bit sharper and have more mental clarity.
Thank you. My dad will appreciate the explanation. So, what did the actual R&D process look like though? How long did it take you from finding that manufacturer to getting the first batch in hand where you would have felt comfortable actually going to market with it? How long did that process actually take? And maybe what sort of setbacks did you have along the way, if any?
So the way we found our manufacturer, Christine and I had gone through every single manufacturing booth at Expo West, and I would say that was over a couple years. So again, it wasn't a one and done situation. We had thought about this dual layer gummy for quite some time, or like again a filled gummy, trying to find again a way to bring more ingredients in a smaller form, which shockingly is still quite difficult. So that's why, again, there aren't that many gummies that look like ours because this is still very new, I would say, gummy tech, nutraceutical technology. We had the formula. We had also tried an iteration of the product that was more in tincture form that did work. So standing up the formula actually was probably the hardest part. And because we had it basically loaded and ready, by the time we went to our manufacturer, we really were ready to just test, like, can you put all of these ingredients and this flavoring together? And so we did maybe 4 rounds. And again, because our manufacturers are in Asia, obviously that took some time. And we did our own internal beta to make sure that the products actually had enough power and strength to them and people were reacting positively to them before doing our final iteration. And then we shipped it.
What was the hardest thing to nail between texture, taste, cost, and functional benefits?
I would say cost was somewhat the same across the whole thing. You're really playing around with scents, when you're talking about the ingredients. And again, we loaded up to 12, really. So that was quite a few. So margins generally on gummies, I would say on supplements in general, is quite high. So that wasn't the biggest challenge. I would say our biggest challenge was taste and texture. And with gummies and again, anything ingestible, anything that you want people to love, these are the two things that people are going to comment on first. When we, started, we got a lot of people who smelled the product before they tried it. And that's actually not even a natural thing for me, but I think it's so interesting to understand, again, just classic behavior around what people do when they try new products. And so it was very important for us to nail texture and taste. That's something that people come back to us with, that they're surprised that they don't taste any functional mushrooms or any of the other herbs, which are quite bitter. And the second piece is that a lot of people very much enjoy the texture. So I'm very happy that, yeah, we got those two things right.
It's really interesting to me that efficacy wasn't one of the considerations you just listed, because and I don't wanna sound like a skeptic at all, but I'm really interested to hear about how you felt confident in the efficacy, knowing that these products can take some time to have a noticeable effect. Talk to me about how you considered that both as part of the early production runs, but also in how you're communicating the timing of the functional benefits in terms of what consumers can expect, because that's something I don't think shows up often on shelf.
Yeah, so of course, efficacy for us overall at like a principle level is number one. If the product doesn't work, we shouldn't make it and we shouldn't push it out into the world. The last thing that we want to do is put more stuff into the world that is meaningless. And for us, definitely efficacy is number one. I would just say, like, as a differentiator or like part of our process to getting to market, we definitely had that as a hard check based on the formula, based on, again, known synergies with these ingredients. So that aspect was like much more solved from, I would say, a process perspective versus the other things that were more out of our control. Julie, again, and Christine, they're doctors. Julie is a practice clinician. She knows exactly what she's doing with herbs. She knows exactly how these things in combination should affect the body. But the real challenge was like, if we took this base formula and put it into the gummy, will that still work? And so that aspect 100% was like sort of, our number one thing. But you're right, for most gummies, immediate efficacy has never been a thing. That's why you have a lot of gummy vitamins. Like, people just take them like candy and they kind of hope that they work, and maybe they see effects after 2 weeks, after 30 days. For gummies that absolutely need to work, and that was sort of the challenge that we set ourselves up against, which is, again, for better, for worse, for us, we wanted for people to be able to have that instant gratification. And I think that's very difficult with gummies overall. If you've ever had an edible or anything else, it's usually taken at least 45 minutes to an hour to metabolize. And for us, this dual layer format really allows us to be able to have something that you start to absorb through the mouth just by chewing more of it. And we have, again, specific ingredients for those short action effects. So you should feel something within 20 minutes. And again, that was done on purpose, but it is kind of a unexpected, I would say, outcome because most people don't expect gummies to work right away.
In the early days, did you attempt to I know there's no sort of clinical trials, but did you attempt to quantify the efficacy via some sort of placebo or anything like that?
We did our own beta. Again, that was part of our testing to like make sure that the products definitely worked. Maybe we needed to turn up or down certain things based on the dosage that we were expecting as well. I would say that, yeah, we're hoping to get to a clinical trial eventually. Again, they can be quite expensive, but for us, yeah, that level of rigor around whether things worked or not, we definitely tried to test for that ahead of time so that we even ourselves could get real feedback on whether these products actually worked. Because once you put out into the universe that you should feel something within 20 minutes, that is a standard that everyone's going to hold you against.
Before we get into the hard launch and distribution, I'm interested to hear more about how you were thinking about brand building from the onset.
So, with my background, for better for worse, I always like to do things a little bit differently. Almost can't help it. When I saw all the wellness brands coming up and also supplement companies, I felt that everything felt a little washed. Everything kind of looked the same, very similar aesthetics. And when I thought about what we were building, again, this whole sort of white space of cognitive well being, it was really fun for me to figure out, like, how can we differentiate ourselves quickly and also allow for the world and what we're building in terms of felt effects translate through that. How can we communicate the sort of like X factor of the products and also of the precision of what we're bringing to this in the brand in itself. And part of that, it comes down to the shape of the gummy, how the gummy looks in itself, how our packaging looks, our logo being very simple, also the name being very simple. It's a palindrome, it's about balance. And also being able to demonstrate that supplements don't have to look like classic things that sit on the shelf in your cabinet. What's really fun about the gummy is that we can put it in different contexts, design, fashion, sport, performance, and it has a different life, and people can now see that, oh, this is a thing that actually can live with me in different spaces rather than this one thing that stays in my cabinet forever and I don't really look at it ever again. And I believe, the future of wellness is definitely social. And so the idea is like, how can we encourage people to see this thing as something that can be social and shareable and fun? And so that aspect of experiential outcome is really what drove most of the branding.
Tell me more about the social sharing component. Did that factor into, yeah, the container itself?
When we thought about packaging, we could have done, what they're calling chaos packaging, taking something that is more of a juxtaposition and put them together. But when we thought about where we would sit on shelf, and even also as a direct to consumer brand, you have to think about legibility as much as possible. If people don't understand what it is, you're gonna have to do all the work and energy to educate them before they even try the product. This was a huge learning when we had a tincture product that we just tried at some point. People, they would mistake what it was. They didn't know what it was. And I think that learning, again, around legibility really, I would say was a good foundation for creating the bottles, which was don't make custom parts. Don't even think about it until you've done your first one, because replacing parts will be very expensive if everything is custom. And again, if we're going to stand out on shelf, there's that 3% rule. It's like just tweak it 3%, evolve it, don't revolutionize. And when you revolutionize, again, you're losing legibility along the way. So for us, it was important for us to just look like a supplement in some capacity. People can recognize this. They're like, okay, gummy in a bottle, it's probably a supplement. But if it was gummy in a pouch or like a nice looking thing, they would have thought it's probably candy. But again, for us being much more holistic inside out about ingredients, format, etc., of course, the packaging definitely had to read more reliable than your typical gummy vitamin on shelf. So the sort of science layer comes in with this chrome fade to clear, being able to actually see the gummies, see that they're different, and also just have this like very cool package that actually is something that people want to take a photo of and share.
We could really spend the entire time talking about branding and on packaging as well, but I do want to hear about launch. So tell me about how the launch went. Did you have any retail partners to start, or did you launch purely D2C?
We launched in with Happier Grocery, actually, in New York, and they were a great partner to us early. We did want to launch more like primarily direct to consumer, but as a brand that wasn't, we started with a very small friends and family round. So again, we weren't as capitalized as some other brands were. We couldn't necessarily afford, I would say, competing with a lot of direct to consumer brands on meta ads. That cost of acquisition was really high. So we did independent omni-channel on purpose to be able to use shelf space as marketing space, as discovery space, and also again focus on our direct to consumer business.
What were some of the most impactful lessons from that period of time?
I think, what's been really encouraging is, sometimes we're in our own vacuum, in our own bubble as well. Like I'm always surprised when I hear that people have heard about us, mostly because I think we're still quite small. But I would say, I definitely underestimated the power of recognition, brand recognition, packaging recognition. Because we came up with something that just looked and felt so different to people, there was a lot of talk that I was just not aware of that was happening and people were sharing it around. So when I met people in real life and we did a lot of one-to-one events to allow people to try, the product in itself, I felt like proof was in the pudding. If they try it, they'll feel something then, in 20 minutes and then be more likely to buy. In that period, a lot of people had come up to us and said like, "Oh, I've seen this already." And that was really gratifying. But I think, yeah, for us, what was really helpful was actually doing one-to-one events to make sure that people actually got a taste for it and understood what we were trying to do.
How were you thinking about the role of D2C early on, knowing that this is the type of product that you would likely want to encourage developing a subscription around?
D2C, I mean, this is where you can make the most money. First and foremost, your margins are going to be the best there versus doing wholesale, right? Large retail. And for us, there's no reason a supplement can't do well, online. Again, if the education and the general legibility of the product is clear. For us, being able to create routines, I think, especially with a new product, it's still hard. There's just so much on the market. Why should someone choose your gummy or our product over something that they're already using? And so I think, our challenge was to really try and communicate the benefits, and also again with sampling and seeding, being able to make sure that people could just try it. So they actually got like the idea of the product was very much crystallized for them the moment they're able to actually have it. It's really difficult to describe taste and effect. People just have to trust it. So being able to pair events with our direct to consumer business was very important, and also to capture that pipeline, emails, events, Instagram, that really helped drive a lot of traffic and interest to our direct to consumer business. And then we could follow up via email and also think about DMs as well.
I'm interested to hear about what percent, if you're comfortable sharing, of your online customers today are subscription customers.
Yeah, I would say our subscription penetration right now is at 5%. But what we're noticing behaviorally, which is interesting for us, and we're, still learning more, is that a lot of people are buying, they're maybe on their eighth, ninth, 10th orders. They're not subscription, they're not subscribers, but they're buying in bulk. That's a really interesting behavior for us that we're still learning more from. People are either buying for themselves and their partners. We've heard a lot from other people that their boyfriend or girlfriend stole their gummies, so they need to, come back and buy more. So this is something that's interesting, where a part of me wonders about how are consumers like thinking about subscriptions now, whether again there's a little bit of a malaise there. So I think we're still figuring out what is the right subscription lever that keeps people there. And again, I think this is something that everyone is working on, but I would say our general repeat purchase rate is around 30 to 40%. So it's pretty decent.
That is fascinating. I'm trying to wrap my head around why somebody would purchase something 8 or 9 times and then forego the opportunity to subscribe and save. I understand once or twice, but 8 or 9 is shocking to me.
I mean, we launched November 2024. So we've had some people from the very beginning just still order one off. And maybe it's just easier that way. But this is something, again, maybe our subscription deal is not lucrative, or like it's not enough savings for them to actually subscribe. So again, we're still like figuring that out, I would say.
Yeah, is that something that you can easily A/B test online?
We can test, I think, with first time, easier from, new customer acquisition from Meta. We are looking at our own segment in our customer base to see like who's converting more than others. Is it a price thing? Is it a duration thing? So there's a lot for us on that end to work on this year.
Got it. Makes sense. There's been some exciting traction in the retail space. So I'd love to shift gears and talk a little bit about your retail expansion. Tell me about what's been going on that front.
Yes, is this the big reveal?
I guess so.
Yeah, well, we've had a very momentous year. I would say a lot of good retail launches and retail opportunities. More recently, we are now launching into 878 Target doors nationwide.
Congratulations, first of all.
Thank you. We're part of the spring summer reset. We're really excited. We're going to be in the mushroom section in the supplement space. All of our on shelf competitors are already there. So it's a nice rising tide for us to be in good company.
I mean, yeah, again, congratulations. It is really interesting to me, though. I think it's very telling that there's an entire mushroom section. Tell me about the competition and beyond branding and packaging, which is the most obvious, the most immediate sort of lever you have to pull. Yeah, I'm curious how you're thinking about differentiation beyond the more obvious tactics.
Yeah, I mean, the mushroom section is new. It's definitely growing. we didn't know where we would have sat, when we were talking to the buyers last year and our brokers as well. But now it's really rounding out to be quite nice. And so we are rolling out onto shelves very soon. So I think we're also going to be, it's going to be new for us to see who else is there that they're also bringing in this season. But I would say our competitors are ones that you would find typically. So Plant People, Supermush, Alice, Ohm as well. For us, we do show up differently, and without, again, like I said, it's a rising tide for people to understand that mushrooms are great for mind and body. I think every brand offers something different. I do think our products, again, look a little bit more science backed. So that could be a reason that, again, someone chooses our product over someone else's. And again, that dual layer gummy, the reason why we also had it fade to clear is that you can really look at it and understand like, oh, this is like a high concentrate, premium looking product, and there would be a reason to choose ours versus another one that's in a pouch.
What does it mean to soft launch at Target?
Well, we are probably one of the smaller brands to actually go in. Most brands will have this opportunity year 3, 4, and we are going in more or less just after year 1. So for us, there is a bit of an inventory shuffle that we have to ensure that we don't have gaps. And so we are trying to slow our velocity down the beginning and then really turn it up for the summer.
I see. And you mentioned 800 or so stores. I don't know offhand the number of Target stores that exist in the country, but I'm interested to hear about how those specific stores were selected. Was that a collaborative process? Was that entirely done on the buyer side at Target? What did that look like?
So Target has about 2,100, I think, nationwide. So we are not in every door. All of our doors are more or less in major cities, which is great for us. Either we have existing customers there or, again, independent stores also in the same location. I would say that we didn't have any input in terms of what doors we were going to go into. I do believe that the buyers have been working on, again, we're not the first mushroom-based brand to go into store. They have been building out this assortment over the last few years. Again, is a great signal that the fact that we're rolling out not into 100 doors or 300 doors, we're rolling out nationwide, there means that there is like great demand for products like ours. So this is something that they're taking a bet on as much as we are.
Yeah, the signal is clearly there. This is going to sound like a dumb question on the surface, but I promise I will get somewhere with it. Why Target specifically? And I ask because I think it's really interesting to hear about how people choose where to show up in real life. So, why Target specifically when there are so many other avenues you could have potentially chosen to go down in terms of where to launch?
It's a good question. Target is very specific for us. I would say we can't totally behave like food. Supplements like ours are a much harder lift. When people are in a cafe, they're not necessarily looking for a sleep supplement or a chill gummy, right? I would say context absolutely matters in that regard. If again, your general journey to land at this destination wasn't to find something to manage your cognitive well being, you're not going to look for it either. So when you think about consumer mindset, that's something that we absolutely have to apply. We can sit at hotels because, again, people expect great sleep at hotels. Or, again, we can be at higher end studios, fitness centers, gyms, yoga studios, etc. Because, again, contextually, from an experience perspective, our products go hand in hand. Same with bathhouses, same with other gyms, etc. And this is something that we evaluated very carefully. If we were going to have exposure, it's either a lot of natural grocers, which again, people are still shopping for food first and foremost, and they are supplements, or it's going to be places like Whole Foods or Sprouts or Target, where again, more up and coming emerging brands are actually launching and also surfacing. We have limited reach otherwise.
How are you thinking about then expanding into gyms, bathhouses, hotels? What does that next part of the strategy look like?
I would say we actually started there. All of last year was partnership building and aligning ourselves with the right institutions and brands that we felt like we sat at the same caliber. with. So, we've done a ton of nice partnerships with places globally and also across the US to be able to help people contextualize our products well. Places like Othership, we did something with Goop, we did something with Adidas Running, we did something with Saucony. We're going to launch into public hotels. So I think, again, there's a lot of the right destinations. We've been trying to piece all of these dots together and connect them ahead of doing something like a Target. And what's great about Target versus, let's just say, Walmart is that the Walmart customer is still very much price conscious, but for Target, it's still a place of discovery. And that was, again, very intentional on our front and strategic, so that we're able to capture a whole other demographic of people who don't necessarily live in big cities, and or they are families who shop at Target all the time. And again, also know that Target has this sort of vested interest in bringing in new, great up and coming brands.
Yeah, absolutely. There's this interesting tension to me around this product being sort of rooted in Eastern medicine and more Asian traditions while also wanting to be universally appealing. And I'm interested to hear about how you weighed that trade off in developing the product as a whole.
Yeah, it's interesting that you frame it as a trade off. I think this is where we have permission to do both. And we're able to tap both sides, East and West, together, because that is truly the makeup of our team and also the genesis of the product and the brand. I think we're able to do this in a way that no one else really has permission to do. It's really different for an Asian person to talk about traditional Chinese medicine than someone who has learned it separately, that is non-Asian. And I do think, unfortunately, sometimes things are not validated or popularized enough until someone else makes it a trend. And people being in a very Chinese time in their lives right now is definitely a trend. I think for very interesting, larger geopolitical reasons as well. But I'm here for it. And like, as more people learn more about traditions and also food that is healthy for you, I think everyone can benefit from that kind of education and knowledge. For us, the brand is a reflection of our roots, also our education, and also what we care about. And I would say that traditional Chinese medicine is a very specific practice. We are not TCM practitioners, and we would never claim to be. But I would say the sort of general medicinal roots and also the herbs that we're choosing are very much present in traditional Chinese medicine. There are so many more that exist that we will probably never use, but it is this beauty of like having this embedded knowledge and also lived cultural knowledge of these ingredients that really make them powerful for me personally. Mushrooms, everyone is now realizing that mushrooms have these benefits, but again, mushrooms have been a cornerstone of TCM for thousands of years. And I think even like 5 years ago, people were saying that mushrooms had no nutritional benefit. So it is a little bit of a challenge when Western medicine needs to prove out Eastern medicine. And if there's no clinical study, people then question the efficacy overall. When again, the benefits A, take time to show, and B, there is a whole other universe where these have been proven out. It's just not in the Western format. So this is where you do have sort of I would say, a contrast and a mild conflict, if you want to put it that way, where it is East versus West rather than East and West together. And we're trying to straddle these two worlds very carefully without necessarily canceling each other out. I think, again, we're holding this fine balance together. And we also intentionally designed the brand to be unisex as well. A lot of brands lean more, I would say, female, or they lean more performance, for men. And we're trying to, like, again, dance somewhere in the middle. So I think that tension is healthy for us. And hopefully people understand it as they learn more about the brand as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. And to clarify, I framed it as a trade off because in our prior conversation that we had in
Mm-hmm.
preparation for this call, you had made a comment around not wanting to be pigeonholed into
Mm-hmm.
the quote AAPI company or AAPI brand. And so that's to me where the trade off seemed to
Yes.
stem from.
Yeah, and that's really, again, a larger conversation we can have around international ethnic cultural food or anything, again, that has ethnic roots. I think in America, people like to bucket you into a certain category. Asian owned brands, AAPI, those Black owned brands, and not that, again, I'm not proud of our roots. I just think that it distracts from the overall message of what we're trying to create. And in some way, that's also why we've been a little more faceless to the brand, because I think that sometimes when you say it's traditional Chinese medicine roots, people just think that it has less efficacy or it's not as potent. And that is somewhat like coached into us, right? Again, I'm not going to knock modern medicine, but just to say that, again, there's an overprescription challenge in this country. And you are seeing the sort of natural movement as a reaction to that.
As you think about expansion internationally, and maybe that's not something you've been thinking about yet, but I'm interested to hear about on the topic of Eastern and Western medicine, what challenges you see international expansion down the line presenting, but also maybe in what ways it might be easier given everything we just talked about in regards to the sort of bias toward Western medicine that we have in the US.
I think it's interesting hearing from either international retailers and partners and our manufacturers on their perception of our product. What the US has is brand recognition. There's brand halo that is developed here, created here, that I think is very powerful and that transcends globally. But from a product perspective, I think us having our gummies being more natural, rooted in real ingredients. We're just, again, taking herbs and combining them into this gummy form. It's not synthetic in any regard. It actually allows us to go further than if we had maybe created something synthetic or more medicinal. I would say that really what we made is just food. So we did this very strategically in order to allow us to be as borderless as possible in terms of where we could ship our goods. But in terms of reception, we have had inbound interest from Japan, Korea, China, everywhere in Europe. Everyone is ready for a gummy like ours, but something that looks reliable and reputable. Again, we don't look like candy and our brand doesn't show up like candy. We show up as a company that's taken a lot of thought and intention and made this very specific dual layer gummy that is meant to actually work. And people are getting that from the sort of all the brand touch points that we have. So I would say actually for us to move internationally, it's probably going to be a lot easier for us than we think. It is just a matter of obviously like tariffs and HS codes and stuff like that. But in terms of general reception, people are ready. And we are very excited to see how we can expand next year.
Amazing. I'm very excited to see how that goes. What's something you've changed your mind about since starting Noon?
Probably what success looks like. Everyone's been talking about the broom sale last week. Every VC you meet asks you, what does the next 5 years look like? Everyone probably wants to say exit because that's what people want to hear. But, the time frame and longevity of a company, I've been thinking about this a lot. For me, success looks like if Noon exists 10 years from now. If we are a household name, if the behavior around feeling stressed means to take a couple Noon gummies, just like if you have a headache, to take an Advil. Or if you're feeling a little low on energy, you're like, okay, let me just have a coffee. That is like an ultimate goal. But the speed in which we do it, I think for me has changed. Being a little bit more practical with goalposts. I think, again, it's so easy to get distracted with reading about so and so raised X amount and then so and so had this exit. And again, it clouds your judgment, I think, on really what is the right kind of success for yourself personally. And I think for me, again, we're creating a category, and that doesn't happen overnight. Cognitive wellness is still something that's going to be a long-term play. Everyone's talking about longevity right now, and no one's exiting, with longevity yet, right? It's still something that it needs to persist. It needs to still grow and evolve. And I think, yeah, what success looks like has definitely changed in that regard.
It's a great answer. I think you also answered my next question. I always wrap up my conversations by asking, where do you see the brand 3 to 5 years out? So I appreciate you answering that one in advance. So, given we have time for one more question, I'm going to change it up today and ask if you could go back and give yourself a single piece of advice that you think would have potentially made things significantly easier down the line or just altered the trajectory of the company earlier on, what would it be?
This is an age-old thing, but it is trust your gut, truly. Everyone as they learn to build something, and everyone's saying they're probably building the airplane as it's flying. The reason why you're going to be successful is because of your own experience and also listening to and learning from those experiences to make better decisions later. If you felt a little bit off in one regard, like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have done this, being able to more quickly pivot and iterate, I think is, again, your gut telling you that you need to make changes. But I would say, for myself, I'm not a traditional CPG founder by any means. And I think that's actually I would say to my benefit in the sense that I don't have to do things the same way as everyone else. There are playbooks. And I think, if I could tell myself to tap the experts that know how to play those playbooks and the ones who wrote them, I would say do that. But I would also say figure out what the role is that you actually want to play in the business. Some people think they need to do it all. And at the end of the day, I think teams exist for a reason, and you just have to figure out your best role in it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Jane, thank you so much for the time. I learned a ton. If you want to share with listeners where they can find Noon, please feel free to do so.
Well, you can find us at www.noon.world and now on Target.com. So Google Noon World Target and you'll probably find our product somewhere on either.
Incredible. I'm so excited to follow along.
Thank you.
All right, let's debrief. What stood out to me most in today's conversation is how much of Noon's business depends on making an unfamiliar product feel legible without flattening what makes it interesting. Functional mushrooms have a long history, but for many consumers, they still sit somewhere between wellness trend, supplement, and traditional medicine. Noon's job is to make that feel practical, something people can understand on a shelf, try without much friction, and use in normal routines. That shows up in a lot of specific operating choices the team made. The gummy format makes the product approachable, but it creates real formulation problems around heat, texture, taste, dosage, and efficacy. The packaging has to signal supplement credibility while still being visually distinct. The retail strategy has to put the product in places where the consumer is already thinking about wellness, recovery, sleep, or discovery. And as Noon moves into Target, that same challenge just presents itself at a much larger scale. But I left this conversation feeling confident that Noon can handle all this complexity. Jane was very clear about what the product needs to communicate, where it belongs, and why the details around formulation, packaging, and retail context matter. Again, I learned so much during my conversation with Jane, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you haven't already, make sure to follow and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.